Greetings and welcome to Hot Topics from the Soul. I'm your host, Dr. Valerie Parker Hagan, and I have my co host along with me.
And greeting and good evening, good afternoon. It's a wonderful day to be alive. And I say to you, I am just grateful because we are storm walkers.
Absolutely, Dr. J. Hopefully, this will be my last week with my shades. I'm dealing
Yes,
with the reflection still on my eyes. For those that are tuning in for the first time, I'm wearing my shades because I had macular eye surgery, and it has been a long, long journey. But thanks be to God, I am here.
absolutely. Things come up in our lives and we never know, what happens inside of it. And it changes the trajectory of our life for a while and we adjust because the main thing is how do we get better? How do we learn to master whatever we're going through? And so it's a little change for a few weeks now. But you could see if you could see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Can't wait. I can't wait. But in God's
Absolutely.
time, and all things are perfect. Can you hear me, Dr. J? Clear you?
I hear you very well. Yes.
Absolutely. Tonight's show is going to be about lessons learned. And, I was pondering over my thoughts this week, and so much has happened. And in the last few weeks, a lot has happened. And I
Yeah.
started thinking about this journey, this path that we're all on right now, and how America is, at a crossroads in their
Yeah.
lives, and their families are being affected in so many ways. And I started thinking about lessons learned. What have we learned in the process of all this transitioning that we're going through and we're facing right now? And I started thinking about how when I was 4 years old, my grandmother had one of those pot belly stoves in
Yeah.
South Carolina,
Yeah.
and I was a busy little bee, 4 years old, busy. And my grandmother had a pot of boiling water on the
Yeah.
stove. And I was fidgeting around, and the thing turned over on my arm.
Wow.
And my arm, I remember it like it was yesterday. My arm began to bubble up, and the flesh was raising up, and I was like stunned. I was shocked. And
Right.
then my mother jumped up and she tried to tend to it. And my grandmother, she grabbed that lard and slapped it on there. Lard was the answer to everything.
Absolutely. Right.
I remember her putting that white lard all over my arm and
Absolutely.
praying.
It's funny. Somebody might be listening to you. They hear you saying Lord. She is saying Lord. She's not saying Lord. Back in that day, listen, there was certain things you call on the Lord, and other thing, Lord was just fine. It helped.
Absolutely, Lord was it. So,
Absolutely.
uh, and I don't think they even make it anymore. Everything
I'm
is
not sure if they
liquid.
make it. Is
The
it?
lard transitioned to Crisco, and then from
Yeah.
there we had the liquid, but it was white, and I mean, made the best fried chicken.
Yes, I remember those days. I remember those days, right? But they seem to found a reason, multiple reasons to use things. The lard, the fat back, you got to cut, and all those different things that they use, to remedy things. But the point I think you're making is the lesson you end up learning from being that close to the stove and being fidgety, and all of a sudden, who would have ever thought that that boiling water up there on that stove would have done that type of damage.
Absolutely. So, Dr. J, there's so many lessons that we are learning along this journey here. And today my phone has been going off back to back with these spam calls, where they're constantly calling saying they're gotten wiser. They're giving you the last four digits of your phone number. So
Right.
I want our listeners to know that when you get these calls and they say, hey, we're calling you to alert you that an account's been open in your name, and your social security in, and blah, 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 blah. And when you say yes, they're recording you saying yes, which
Exactly.
is an authorization. so
Absolutely.
that they record that so they can go to the next step and open up a fraudulent account in your name. So I want people to be aware of that, because a lot of times your information gets confiscated and you're wondering how they get access. Just like, I've several times I've gotten where my credit card was used and I only have the credit card in my purse, but somehow they got my credit card number. It is so difficult and easy in the same tone for individuals to have access to your private information. So be very careful, and also be careful of these companies that tell you they can protect your privacy and protect your accounts and stuff, because they're fraudulent companies as well.
Absolutely. And the thing about it, you have no way of knowing whether or not they're sharing your information, they're selling your information, and these things get out there. Other things to keep in mind is that even with certain cards and your purses and things, people now have these readers. If you don't have anti-magnetic thing to debate that, people can literally lift your credit card number right from off your card. I mean, right in your purse, right in your wallet. So you have to be very careful and be vigilant. Be aware of what's around you. Definitely, because we live in a tight day and time where uh, being vulnerable, you're vulnerable whether you know it or not. You have to protect yourself and don't be so quickly to give up information, to share information with everyone. We get these calls now that says, yes, we're just getting back with you, giving you insurance quotes that I didn't ask for an insurance quote, and that's to begin a conversation. So there's so many things that are happening out there for sure.
Absolutely, Dr. J. Even with relationships, can you share some insight on relationships, lessons learned as far as that's concerned? Because I can tell you a whole lot of lessons I've learned from my parents and my dad especially. He taught me so much about life and things to look forward to. Can you share some of the things that you went through with our audience that can be helpful?
Well, I want to share in general is the fact that life is filled with lessons. Life is filled with lessons. We would be surprised at the hidden gems of wisdom that's in our past. And sometimes our past is pain. That pain should never be in vain. That means that if you suffered pain for any length of time, there was a gem there that you need to learn from. And to think about opening yourself up to learn from the pain that you went through. Whether those lessons is on you, meaning the fact that I miscalculated something, I misjudged something, I gave in too early to something, I made myself too vulnerable to something too early. And so you've got to be willing to go back and reflect over your life, not as if you're stuck, but be able to reflect over your life of the things that you've done, things that you recognize. Because until you go back and reflect on things, you don't know what you've done. You really can't capture the picture. So I like to think of it like this. Uh, Although the past is not a place to live, it is a place to learn. Although it's not a place to live, it's a place to learn. Because we understand when we're in things, we don't always understand. We're just living in the moment. And I don't care what anyone says, we're living in the moment. Very few times we take time to think about what will this look like a year from now, 5 years from now. And so we have to reflect and to grab those lessons that we missed during that time. Another thing that I like to think about the past is this. For me, I am sentimental. I give that. I mean, I am sentimental. I'm that guy who's going to remember the first this, the first that. I'm going to remember the first.
Yeah, that's you, Dr.
Oh,
J.
I actually the first, and I'm sentimental. But I learned to try to balance that because one reason that we are because generally, Dr. Val, I think the audience will understand is that we may not remember days, but we do remember moments. We may not, everyone won't have that type of semi photographic memory I used to have, where I may remember the exact day, but what we do is that we remember moments. And from those moments, we learn lessons from it. And when we reflect on things, it's a good thing to do. I think that every so often, we should all take time to reflect on things, draw the lessons out, and sometimes go ahead and flush after we've done so. Why? Because I need to be able to draw the lesson from it. So at the end of the day, Even if I come out of something that has been painful, that doesn't define me. It represents a chapter of where there's lessons I should have learned. It is the reason why I believe there are no failures. There are only lessons. They're lessons. And the thing about it, when we find ourselves not willing to be transparent enough, because we're still trying to hide the pain. Sometimes we're trying to hide the shame and embarrassment. Sometimes we don't want to share. We don't want to be open and transparent about things that we've done. There are things that we've done that, look, God, I made a fool out of myself. I made a fool out of myself. Wow, I can't believe what was I thinking. Well, that should last but a moment. Don't live in the place of ultimate regret where you're beating yourself up. What is the lesson I learned from that? Because that lesson is something that hopefully that I can share with someone else. But one of the reasons why we don't always draw lessons from our pain and lessons from our failure is because of pride. Because what pride says is, I don't want anyone to know that I was that vulnerable before. I don't want to know any. I don't want anyone to know that I was, goodness gracious, I was that out of it before. But that's the only way that you measure growth. You measure growth by the things that I now have taken from my past experience and I've learned. I learned to see life through a different lens. And with that maturity, it helps us in the future that we're not that person to find ourselves arguing over things that are really insignificant. Running and screaming like we got a forest fire when all it is a little smoke. Those are the things that we learn from our pain, we learn from our past, and the secret is that we have to reflect. We have to take the time to reflect because, to be honest with you, when we look at reflection, reflection is the lamp of the heart. That's what it is. It is the lamp, a light of the heart when we reflect. And it's good to do. Despite the heart, despite the fact that the heart may go through pain, but when we reflect on life, wisdom and knowledge are to show up. Because that's what happens with us. Tomorrow is gone. I mean, yesterday is gone, but we'll look back on it. And what was once yesterday's bad experience now becomes today's lessons. And that's why, whether it's failed relationships, whether it's relationships that was turmoil, whether it was a business venture that didn't turn out the way that you wanted to, whether or not you were misunderstood and someone walked away, there are lessons to learn from it. Embrace those lessons. Don't allow those lessons to label you, but allow them to lift you.
Yeah, we have to learn to be comfortable in our own skin and forgive ourselves from situations and circumstances that we found ourselves in and learn from that experience because that experience creates a lesson for us that we can forge forward and be able to communicate and share with other individuals so they won't make the same mistakes that we've made. Our lives intertwine. I have our dear friend Sherry Rudolph is visiting us. I heard from her today, and I'm so
Yeah.
happy that she reconnected with me today. I told her, I said, my friends that they can pick up the phone and call me, and we just pick up where we left off.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I'm so grateful and thankful for her, joining us tonight. And as I told her, I said, we're going to talk about lessons learned. We learned so many things, even with relationships as it
Yeah,
relates to friends.
exactly.
Sometimes they're in your life for a reason, a season, and some for a lifetime.
Hmm.
So, it is just it's like a transition as we grow, and the Bible tells us about how we go from glory to glory, and that is because we're ever evolving, we're ever coming with knowledge, we ever being endowed with wisdom, and because we've went through situations in our lives. So situations that you've gone through, if they've crippled you, stand up erect and grow your wings and fly because of the fact that you survived whatever turmoil you were in. You're still here, so press forward. Don't allow it to consume you where you can't get a grip on life. And we've been talking about mental illness, how individuals, they have mental breakdowns because of the fact that they're trying to be what individuals want them to be instead of living an authentic life. So what we have to do is make sure that we stay focused on our goals, stay focused on our purpose, and make sure that we don't make our lives an island where we won't have lessons to share with individuals.
You know, Dr. Val, one of the things that life teaches us is this, that life is lived moment by moment,
Mm,
minute by minute, hour by hour. And from the morning to the time you lay down at night, there's so many things that happens in our lives. And the thing I like to always look at life through the perspective of seasons and chapters. When you mentioned your friends, when we meet our friends, we meet each other and we're in different chapters of our life. You and I have known each other for 30 something years. And we think about all the things that we've gone through, all the different things that have happened in our lives. And
yes,
guess what? The person I see today, I can appreciate her resiliency. I can appreciate her brilliance. I can appreciate her persistence. I can appreciate I can appreciate the fact of the matter that she presses her way through things. I appreciate the fact the way she frames the world now. Now, what has changed in those years? A lot has changed. This thing called maturity has happened. Even in the midst of the pain, even in the midst of the disappointment, even in the midst of look like having a carpet pulled from under you, there are things that you and I learn. And it's interesting, we spend our lives not running from our past. See, that's the thing
yes,
about it. We have to be able to face our past. Why? Because history, despite its wrenching pain, history cannot be unlived, but it has to be faced with courage, and not only faced with courage, but we need to face it with courage because it cannot and need not to be lived again. That's it.
ooh,
History, despite its wrenching pain. That is why we all ought to be on board now, even in the political circuit, that how dare you want to whitewash our history? How dare you want to erase our history? Why? We have to stand up not because of black and white, but because of right and wrong. We have to stand up because we want to know and we don't want to ever forget about our history because despite its wrenching pain, and it's painful, it cannot be unlived. We see it in our experiences, our opportunities, and lack thereof every day. And but we have to face it. But when we face it, here's the thing about it. When we face it, we understand it there. We do so that we don't repeat it and live it out again. And that's what it means to move on. When people go through bad breakups, when people go through divorces, when people go through all of these bad deals, you have to make sure that you don't make a graveyard there, that you don't bury yourself inside of what has happened there. Life is meant to be lived on because that's what life is. Life
right.
simply, your past is just a story. Your past is part of your story. It was chapter 3 of your story. Acknowledge now that I'm in chapter 6 now. Chapter 3 may have been painful. My past is my story. And once you realize this, it has no power over you. Once you realize that your past is just your story, then your past has absolutely no power over you. And that's what
Absolutely. Yeah, I want to know from the audience what lessons have you learned? What is, that's how we create legacy. You
yes,
know, we learn from our ancestors because they've told stories. Our
yes,
stories shape frame our lives. If grandma said to do something, then mama learned from what grandmama said and then shared it with us. And I find myself with my children giving them information and sharing those stories. We're not
yes,
sharing the stories anymore. We're not talking about legacy and what auntie did and what uncle did that was
yes,
positive. All we want to focus on is what we see on television, these celebrities and these athletes and stuff like this. But we have history in our own families that need to shape our world so we can live in the truth and in the reality that we we are, more than what the world says that we are. We can create our own path and leave a trail because we've been through some things, and the lessons that we'll learn, that we can write them down and book and put it in a book. There's so many listening to me right now that have so many stories, so many lessons that they've learned. Write it out in a book. Start journaling so that you can have an inheritance to pass along to your children. Even if you don't publish the book, write it down and put it in the vault of history so
Yeah.
that it will be there for the next generation and that generation to come. There's a song saying, I forgot who sang the song saying, I was here.
Yes. Yes.
We want people to know we were here. For whatever moment we were here, we want to make sure that we leave a mark, we leave a dent in the earth so that we will always be remembered and not forgotten.
That is so powerful in what you're saying because, you know, one day we won't be here. And the only proof that we have had been here is the impact and the things that we leave behind. There are those who recognize that, and they are famous today. We know them, although we never met them. Think about Helen Keller. Helen Keller couldn't see; she was blind, had all kind of defects, and yet still we quote Helen Keller all the time. Why? Because Helen Keller understood that the travesty of life was not the fact that she could not see. She didn't look at the fact of her not being able to see as being a travesty, but she said rather the travesty is having eyes to see but no vision.
But
No
no
vision for
vision.
the future, no vision about what your life could be. And then one of the other things that she talked about, yeah, and one of the things that she talked about that was so powerful, she said these words. She said, life is a succession of lessons, which must be what? Lived to be understood. Life is a succession of lessons that must be lived to be understood. Why is that important? It is important to those that oftentimes retreat at the first sign of trouble. It is important for those who retreat at the first time of rejection. It is important for people to understand that those that have dealt with rejection and thought that it was some type of kryptonite. No, life is a succession of lessons which must be lived in order to be understood. You don't know what you're able to do, what you're able to overcome until you live life. We often say life is like a tea bag. It ain't worth nothing until it goes through some hot water. And when you go
Woo.
through hot water, the flavor of who you are begins to come out. The flavor of what's inside of you becomes alive when you live life. And that's why we encourage people, don't run from your past. God will deliver you from your past. God isn't afraid of your past. That's why we have to know that when the enemy continuously tries to hold us hostage from going forward by reminding us of what our past was. But you know what? I get excited about this part because it delivered me, Dr. Val. The past is not a place to live, but it's a place to learn. That's what we said. It's not a place to live, but it's a place to learn. That's what the Bible meant when it said in Isaiah 43, it says what? Forget the former things.
The
Do not
former
dwell on
things.
the past. See, I am doing a new thing. What is he saying? God is saying he doesn't erase our past. No, he doesn't. I love it. He doesn't erase our past, but he uses our past to propel us forward. He uses what we went through to propel us forward. Because we're not meant to do what? We're not meant to live in regret, but rather to live in revelation. What have God revealed to me, even in my pain? What have God revealed to you, even in your pain and your circumstances? Whether it's the pain of a loss, whether it's the pain of lost money, lost relationship, whether it's the pain of lost time, there's something that God is revealing there. There are lessons to be learned. And that is the thing that ought to keep us going forward because sometimes you have to look back in order to understand what lies ahead. It was Ralph Waldo Emerson that said it very good. He said, what lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us. And so many times people lose sight because they're focusing too much on what lies behind them and they are anticipating too much what lies before them. and they miss out on the incredible treasure that lies within them. And inside of what lies within you are lessons learned.
Mm.
Learned. You
You
know,
said something real interesting, Dr. J. You talked about treasures. Unfortunately, individuals won't realize or recognize the treasures before them until the gift is taken away. It's stories and lessons that we've taught our children that they're not hearing because we're here. They feel that we'll be here always, and they won't be able to see or accept it until we're taken away.
yeah,
Then their eyes will become open, their ears will pop where they'll be able to hear the messages that we're telling them. And then they will begin to live and see and experience those lessons that we've told them, those impartations that we're trying to make to empower them and strengthen their lives. Then they'll be able to see clearly. You know, we both suffered a loss this week with
thank you.
Bishop Harold Ray from Redemptive Life Fellowship. And I started thinking about, all of the messages he preached and how I've been empowered by him mentally, spiritually, emotionally, that has carried me all these many years. It's even clearer now. His legacy will continue on because we'll be continuing to speak and echo the things that he said. Likewise, that's how it's going to be with our families.
You said a mouthful because too often you hear us say that we live life forward, but we understand life backwards. And even think about us even as children growing up. As children, guess what? There was a time we go through these cycles of things, right? When we're small children, we are totally dependent on our parents and they're our heroes. We get a little older and start smelling ourselves adolescent. Our parents don't know nothing. They
There
don't
we don't know nothing.
know anything. And then we live life ourselves, and then we recognize the older that we get, the more we realize how right our parents were. Why? Because we now are beginning to understand lessons. And sometimes we don't appreciate the lesson even of our parents until they're gone. We don't even appreciate sometimes the lesson of a friend until they're gone. And that's the thing about it. We have to understand this. And it's funny because the scripture actually says something. Matter of fact, the scripture in Ezekiel 36 and 31 said, then you will remember your ways and all your deeds, and you will loathe yourself for your iniquities and your abomination. What was he saying? He said, honest reflection. And that's why I love reflecting from time to time. Honest reflection, what happens? It leads to transformation.
Mm.
When I look back over my life and I reflect, we look back now with spiritual maturity. We look back now inside of understanding, we gain insights and we're able to talk about those things. Why? Because the fact we have learned our lessons. We can appreciate the impartation in our lives even more now. Why? Because we've grown. That's what the writer there in Psalm said. He said, I once was young, but now I'm old.
Now more.
But I've never seen the righteous forsaken, neither his seed beggars bread. In other words, in my recollection, in my reflecting over my life, when I was young, provision was made for me. And now that I'm old, provision is still made for me. And so now I walk in a maturity called faith because the fact that I know that provision is made for me. And so now I don't run away. Yeah. I don't want to run away from my problems. I don't want to run away from the things that are happening in my life. I don't want to run away, but I want to run too. I want to run straight into his arms. I want to run into the arms of the Lord. I want to run into the arms of understanding because I'm going to say this and I mean this with all my heart. If we really truly take time to reflect and allow ourselves to see through the lens of maturity, how
Mm.
do I know I'm maturing? When the same little old things don't get me irritated and take me off my game. When the same old things, the things that used to entangle me, no longer entangle me. When, guess what? I don't start crying every time I hear that song anymore. When I have when I have carefully evicted the things out of my heart and my mind that used to hold me bondage. That is called now I'm a little stronger now. You know, It was Marvin Sapp who wrote the song, never could have made it without you. And then he takes the time to reflect. He said, now I'm stronger, I'm wiser, I'm better. Why? Because when I look back over all you brought me through, I realized it was you that I held on to. I held on to the hope that took me even through the hot water. Now, when we're going through the hot water, we
We
don't feel
don't
like
feel good.
we don't feel good. Don't feel like there's any end in sight. But I'm here to say that your pain doesn't have to be with you always. You can outlive it. You can learn from it. You can grow from it. And that's what we're talking about. We got to understand something. And this, somebody needs to hear this today. I don't know why I feel this. You got to understand that you got to take yourself out of the bondage. Stop allowing the failures and the mistakes of your past to cripple your future. Mistakes are meant to be made. And guess what? Here's the thing I found out. Mistakes, mistakes are proof. What proof? They're proof of? They're proof that you're trying and that you're learning. Mistakes are proof that you're trying and you're learning. That's the beautiful thing about it. I can now say, you know what? I've learned my lesson. I've gotten a lot better now. Why? Because I made mistakes. I've gone through some things. Think about it. Don't let anyone encage you in your past. Don't let anyone put you in the prison of your past. Don't let anyone try to encapsulate you in a time period that is now gone. In other words, I'm no longer that person anymore. I've grown. I reflect over my past, the things that used to move me. My temperament is different. Why? Because life has taught me lessons. So now when you come, and all of us, I don't know about you, Dr. Val, I was teased at times growing up in school. There was nicknames that used to get to me when they said it, and it would get on your nerves. But what happened? When I was a child, I thought as a child, I understood as a child. My very existence was based upon someone else's opinion. But when I became a man, when I matured, I put away childish things. Because what I realized is I didn't need your approval in order to be who I am. But I simply needed to be able to give myself an opportunity, which means that I had to take chances. I had to take risks. Think about it. Oftentimes, the people that people most criticize are people who take chances and take risks. It's easy for the person who sits on the sideline of the couch to talk about those that will leave the shore and launch out in the deep. There's more room for failure, but by the same token, there's greater room for the opportunity for victory when you're willing to leave the shore, not play it safe, but launch into the deep. There are lessons to be learned. And I just thought about it, Dr. Val. I thought about it. There's a page I actually created years ago on Facebook. You know what it's called? Son of Selma. Lesson,
Wow, right, right.
lesson learned. Why? Every now and then I go back to that page, and that's a son that was raised in the soil of Selma, Alabama. I'm able to now journal and talk about the lessons learned. What are the lessons I learned from the time I was a child to the lessons I learned now? Things that may have been told to me then, but now I can go back and report that guess what? We're not just saying we shall overcome. We can say we have overcome. We can talk about the fact that there's nothing to stop us. There's nothing that is going to cause me to be, if you would, cemented and burned down to what used to be. But rather, I stand on the shoulders of our ancestors and those that dare not stop, those that was willing to get their heads split. And although I remember those painful things, those things are the things that lift me up. And so now the courage that I have is because of the fact I've seen the benefit of pushing. And that's what life lessons are all about. I'm better today than I was before. So if somebody's stuck
Absolutely.
in chapter 3 of your life, don't let them leave them there. If someone is judging the book by the cover, you ought to just say to them, read the book. Take the time to read the book. You don't know who I am. You heard of me, but you don't know me. Because guess what? If you knew me 3 years ago, I got news for you. I'm not the same anymore.
You're definitely not the same person. And
Absolutely.
those that are tuning in and listening to me right now, it doesn't matter what you've been through. You can't redeem time, but you can forge your future. I promise you that today is better than it was yesterday because you're still here. And guess what? Tomorrow is going to be better than today because you're going to show up tomorrow. And each day that you show up with purpose. Each
Absolutely.
day that you wake up, just thank God that you're still here and ask for direction in which way you need to go. Reach out and touch someone. Call somebody that you haven't talked to in years. Sherry reached out and called me today, and it was so delightful. She's brought
Yeah,
so much joy to me. Reach out. It's not about you. That person could be your connection to the next of
absolutely.
what you have in store for your life. But don't stay in a box.
Hmm.
Don't be traumatized by what's going on in the world today.
No.
Because if it persists, we got 4 more years of this almost.
And
But
we will
God,
overcome.
if we're on our knees, He said that He would turn things around. So every day we have to wake up with new ambitions to get to the next level because of the lessons we're learning along the way.
That's so powerful, Dr. Val. It's funny. Lessons. We generally think about lessons that learn in the classroom, right?
Whew.
The scripture says in Psalm 90 and 12, it says, teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Because you know what? Life is not measured in time, but in transformation. It's measured in transformation. Many people try to count the number of years in life, the number of years, days in the years, rather than counting, if you would, the quality of the year, life inside of those years. And that's what we live our lives when we learn our lessons, because our past is just a story, and we can live on to the next chapter.
Absolutely. Thank you for
Absolutely.
tuning in to another Hot Topics from the Soul. I want to invite you also to make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel. We look forward to seeing you next week, same time on Hot Topics from the Soul. Good night and God bless.
Absolutely.
Hot topics from the soul, reaching all minds, turning knowledge into gold. Hot topics from the soul, hot topics from